Now each of our if mathematical formulas, SUMIF, COUNTIF and AVERAGEIF, are also available in plurals, SUMIFs, COUNTIFs and AVERAGEIFs. Now the idea behind the plurals is that they can check and effectively have to satisfy more than one criteria. So our SUMIF, as we've seen it in action using the sales data, was able to sum up all the sales for January and for February and for March. However, if we wanted it to respond to two criteria, so to sum up, for example, in the sheet here, all the sales for each Sunday in January, each Sunday in February, each Sunday in March, each Monday in January, we're going to need to use the plural version, the SUMIFs version. So in the cell here that will add up the total amount of sales in Sundays in January, so that's all the Sundays in January, we would use equal SUMIFs, so the plural S on there, open bracket. Now the order that each of the parameters appear is slightly different. Firstly, we have the sum range, so the range that you're looking to add up. So that would be value. We're using our named ranges, value, comma. The first criteria range, is going to be the month, and the criteria that you're going to look up in that range. So that's going to be the one there to represent January, comma. We're then looking at the second criteria range, which is going to be day, which is again a set named range, comma, and the criteria that feeds into this, which is going to be the one for Sunday. Now, if there were a third and a fourth criteria that was relevant, that would just continue, comma, the range you're going to look up the criteria, comma, the value or the cell that contains the value that you're going to look in that criteria range. So there's only one range for doing the adding up in, and that appears right at the beginning of this formula. So that's the range that we're going to be taking our values from, just happens to be called value. That's the first range to look up that value in, that's the second range to look up that value in, and you could have a third range to look up a third value in. But we're making it complicated enough with two values that must be satisfied. Close the brackets and return, and the total value of all sales for every Sunday in January is $2.49. Bit of formatting. Now we can take this formula and drag it along, but before we do that, we do need to dollar up part of it, and that's the reference to the month. So we dollar this cell reference up here, so when we drag along, it will change what it's looking at as far as the day goes, but still look at the correct column there. And that way we can see the total sales. So actually, all the Saturdays in January, there were no sales, and there were no sales in Mondays, but Tuesday and Wednesday were quite big. In fact, Tuesday were the biggest. So the total of all the sales on Tuesdays in January was the biggest for January. If we then want to take this formula and drag it downwards, then we need it to keep looking at that day, dollar up the day, but we'd like the months to change. Undo. We haven't taken the dollars off there, so that's totally relative. And then we can take that and drag it down, and that makes more sense. So these are the total sales values for all the Sundays in the relevant month on the left here. So we took September, for example, it's looking at the September month, but it's looking at Sunday. So we can take that formula, again, change the dollars around. So we dollar up the month, but $, remove the dollars for the day of the week. And we can drag that along. Same for March, dollar up, remove the dollars. It's just changing the relativeness and the absoluteness of the right cells, that when you drag the formula, the correct values are calculated. And that's to save you retyping the whole formula out 7 times, 12 times, and along. Okay, so we get the idea. That's SUMIFs. The range you're going to add up, first range to look up this criteria, the second range to look up this criteria, and it can go on. Third range, third criteria, fourth range, fourth criteria. Now you'll find that the COUNTIF comes with a plural as well, COUNTIFs. If we wanted to count how many sales we'd had between each day, the week, and each month of the year, then we could use COUNTIFs. So we start off with equals COUNTIF, don't forget the S for the plural, brackets, the criteria range, so that's going to be month, comma, the criteria. So we're going to take month, number 1 in this case, and look it up in the month column, comma, the second criteria range is day, comma, the day of the week, first day of the week, which is Sunday, close brackets, and we made 1 sale on a Sunday in January. Now we can do the same with the COUNTIFs, in that if we make absolute the reference to the month, we can take this function and drag it to the right, and see how many sales we made on each day of the week in January. Go back to this original function, make that relative, but make that one absolute. We can then drag that down for each month. You can see that in April, for example, we made 2 sales on Sundays in April. Whereas in November, we made 12 sales on Sundays. So we could take the Monday, make the month reference relative, but the day reference absolute. So we can take that formula down. And you can see again, November, quite a busy month by the looks of it, because there's 17 sales on Mondays in November. And we can do the same for the other columns. We can do exactly the same with average. Average if will accept multiple criteria. So we could figure out our average sales. So average ifs, don't forget that plural s, otherwise you won't be able to supply multiple criteria. The range that we're looking to average, which is going to be the sales value. The first criteria will be month, and that will look up using that number 1 there for January. The second criteria range, which is day, and that will look up that cell there for Sunday, close the brackets and return, and the average sales for January are $2.49. Now we saw there was actually only 1 sale, so the total was $2.49. If we then take our formula, and let's make absolute the day reference this time, and then drag that down, you can see that the average then differs from the totals because our quantities have been different. So November's average sale is $9.02, whereas October is $21.99, even though there were less sales. Obviously higher sales, higher value. That's average ifs as well. So average ifs set out just like the sum ifs really. Open brackets, the range that you're going to do the math on, in this case average, the first criteria range, the first criteria, second criteria range, second criteria, and you could go on, the third criteria range, the third criteria. Each of those criteria must be met for the returning value to be taken from, in this case, the value range in our sales data.